I found this website a while ago and I thought it was really interesting. Does anyone know Adventure Time, the show? Okay, so Adventure Time has a fan. If you guys haven't seen the show, it's just awesome. It's really interesting, and I think it's really perfect for this project. So this website, it's actually a fan-made website, so people can contribute and stuff like this, user input, which is perfect for web scraping because it's like there's things that can be like a little off and stuff like that. So you have to kind of figure out how to deal with these things. And what's kind of cool about the show or this website, it actually includes transcripts. So this is all user generated. I'm going to close this little ad here. User generated data. And so basically people are contributing to here. And you can see here, for example, it's just basically a transcript, kind of like a more of a script than it is a transcript. But you can see here, for example, there's different characters, Jake, Lady Rainicorn, who, by the way, only speaks in Korean. So you have some extra Korean stuff, as well as translation, it looks like. There's some really funky words. For example, you can see Princess Bubblegum, which is linked to there's other people. Decorpsinator Serum, so you can see this kind of like interesting words. You can see there's also actions that are being kind of put in here that are different from the actual who's saying things. So there's a lot of interesting information, and this might be really useful, like let's say you care about, you know, Adventure Time or whatever, but it's not going to be super structured. You're gonna have to figure out how to go through here. And also, like I said, there's some weird, you know, words and stuff like this. For example, like this Korean speak and stuff right here, like this person's speaking Korean and then actual translation. How do you deal with this? There's also weird words like decorpsinator. I'm pretty sure there's some other strangeness in here. This is like the first episode, which is already really weird. Okay, so let's say we want to scrape this stuff, right? So what we can do is let's go ahead and just go ahead and open up a new activity. I think I started in this part, so I don't have to completely start from scratch. Okay, so I'm just gonna walk with you guys on this part, but this is the actual website. One thing that you'll notice when you start going into this specific slumber party panic, if I go inspect element, I wanted to show an example of like really not, like you're like, oh, I have to web scrape this data. So here is from ESPN, some statistics of NHL players. You're like, cool, awesome. Like, oh man, I have to web scrape all this stuff. This is where it's really cool. It's like you can actually, with pandas, so web scraping, this is it, right? Yes. So I can go ahead and open this guy up. Import pandas as PD. All right, so you're like, oh man, I have to scrape all these things. I have to inspect this and all this, you know, crazy junk. What's really nice is that because this is actually in a table format, pandas actually can read tables directly, just like they read CSVs from HTML. So what I can do, so if I can do this right, where am I at? There we are. I can just do pd.read HTML. Nice. Let's say this is df. And I can say, okay, read this website. And what's cool, I actually have this. And if I do df, hey, we got some stuff. So you can actually pull this up without ever having to scrape anything, which is like awesome. Like this is like the ideal world. Now it's not super clean yet, so there's actually a couple things you can do. So I actually know this data a little bit. So I can just go ahead and skip rows. Skip rows, or is it skip? Yeah, skips rows. And I'm gonna skip rows, the first one. And you can see here, this actually is what I want. And I can actually just say, okay, give me the first element. So for example, if I just do len of df, which is not really a df yet, I kind of lied, right? I can actually pull up the first element in here because there's a list. And the beautiful part, oh, look at that. It's already a table. I don't have to do anything and it's already like set up in here. So this is a really useful thing. Unfortunately, you're like, hey, could we do the same thing here? Well, this only works for tables. So if I go ahead and inspect this, like, well, okay, if this is a table, sweet, I can just read this in, awesome, go right through it. And I look at this and I go, what the heck is a DL, DL, DD thing? Like, this is not a table. Like, what is this? It's some HTML5 thing that someone put together because they're web developers and they're not looking out for us data scientists. They just want to put some information on here. So we got to figure out how to scrape this stuff. Okay, so this is kind of like an ideal situation, well, an ideal situation for web scraping. Not ideal for you because like you saw how easy that was to do like this guy right here. Unfortunately, this website is not super easy. And there's also weird stuff too if you go into different, like if I go to, let's see here. I think if I go to the original, this guy, this transcript, you can see all these different things. Some transcripts actually have missing information and stuff like this. So this becomes an issue with web scraping. You're like, how do you make sure I have all the information. So this is a really fun one. I think this is a really great website to practice web scraping with, because plus it also kind of keeps you interested. Like a zombie Mr. Cream Puff arises and moans, algebraic, like just weird stuff. Anyway, so let's try to web scrape this stuff. So we kind of inspected the element in here. Inspect, there we go. Pulling it up. And we can see, okay, like, we can see DL right here. We can see H2, that's this transcript. So we obviously want to pull after this point down here, right? So this is where we're gonna have to figure out like what exactly to do. But you can see here, it looks like all of the lines are just encapsulated with DL. And if I scroll down, ooh, too far. Too far. Hope I'm not making you guys dizzy. You can see here, Starshy Farts, that's the episode ends. And you can see that's where I want to stop, right? So I want to basically look at all DLs. So it's like, hey, maybe I can just pull up all DLs and we can probably have this in order and everything like that. Looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and try to do some web scraping. And I'm going to move you guys so I can see you guys if you guys have any questions. I have a couple minutes. You guys okay if I go like maybe 5 minutes over? Let's introduce it. Okay. I'll keep it recording too if you guys can't make it. All right. So let's go ahead and just, oops, this is the wrong one. Let's get rid of this guy since we're not going to use this. We're going to go ahead and start kind of saying, okay, let's document our stuff really well. So let's just do the main page URL is equal to, let's just go ahead and pass in this as the URL. So, oops. So this way I can keep things going, and I'm making this as like the main page URL. That way I can just change the URL name for later on. So if I want to go through multiple pages and stuff like that, I don't have to go and change that line. I can just change, I don't have to change the specific URL that I'm feeding into Beautifulsoup. I can just change that specific reference on that variable. That makes sense? So that way it's a little bit easier for us to find. Okay. And then let's go ahead and do, oops, you know what I have to do? I have to import request. And then import, oops, keyboard skew, BS4, oops, from BS4, import Beautifulsoup. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and use request then. I'm just going to say this is response is equal to request. This is too low for me. There we go. Request. And then we're going to do, how do we get a web page from request? You remember? It's dot something. Start with the G.
Is it like get URL?
You're so close. Just dot get. Yeah. So dot get, and then we actually give the URL. So main page URL. Okay. So cool. We got our thing. And then I'm just going to make the soup all in one line here to make it nice and easy. Soup is equal to Beautifulsoup. And for Beautifulsoup, we're just going to use the response. And then we're going to use response.text, just because it's just going to give us the text of the document and everything like that. Oh, I saw someone sit in the chat. Oh, that's okay. Steven had to go. What did Steve say? He said goodbye. Okay, so back to response stuff like that. All right, response.text, and then we also pass the HTML parser. So this is specific to Beautifulsoup, just so it knows what to parse. All right, so we run this guy. Boom, we got our soup. So let's go ahead and from our soup, just to prove that it is there, you can see, hey, check it out. All right. So you could technically just pull this up instead of doing like inspect element, but I'll probably go back and forth so that way I can see what it looks like. But let's just go ahead and do main page is equal to soup. And then I want to find specific parts. So this is where using like an ID and stuff like that can be really useful. So let's go ahead and here and check this out. So we can kind of see, like, okay, like we want to get to this point right here. So before we get to this point, we have to go all the way through here. So we can kind of look, like, well, what's the first container that contains all this stuff? Because you can see these are all like the transcript lines. I'm just kind of zooming up so you can see a little bit where I'm pointing at. You can see here, like we have this stuff right here, and then we have this H2. And if this was all underneath some other div, we could just look for this div, but the highest one above that in the hierarchy is going to be this div with this ID, W content text. I don't care what it is. It's just, that's the ID. And what's nice is because it's an ID, what does that mean for me? Should there be copies of this? Are there other? Good, I saw the head shake from Mike. Yeah, there won't be, there are no copies, so I can just go ahead and search for that specific part. I'm gonna close this guy because I keep going back to it. All right, so let's go ahead and do a .find, and I'm gonna do ID equals, oops, gotta put in the, there we go. All right, so this should basically find everything, find that specific part. I put main page, that's not really right, but that's fine. And so what's gonna happen here, it's gonna get me that specific part. And you can see here, hey, there we go. We have that div, and then we have all this stuff, which is gonna get down to, I think H2 right here, oh, probably further than that. So you can see a little bit further, and then we get to, okay, this is what we want, this DL, DD parts. Okay, so now it's like, okay, cool. Now we actually have a little bit structure in here. We know where this main part is. Let's see here. I'm a little going over. How much time do you guys are okay going over? We can always come back to this, but yeah. All right, I'll go until the 10. How's that? That way I'm not keeping you guys all day. All right, cool. So we got 7 more minutes. All right, so we have this soup. All right, we have this guy. So now instead of looking through the whole soup, I can just look at this guy by itself. So this is really useful to kind of use structure to help limit the size. The reason why I'm doing this too, because it looks like, if I look at this really quickly, it looks like DL and DD are only used in here. But if, let's say, the website updates, or in other cases, there are DLs and DDs in other places that are not what I'm looking at right here. If I just found all DLs, I might have to like exclude those parts and everything like that. It makes more sense to try to get as close and narrow in the structure as possible until you can't anymore. And that way you can kind of like use that, okay? So once I have this main page, I'm gonna go ahead and search for all this data that's in here, right? So if I do this, let's say I want to go ahead and I'm trying to think what we should do. And I'm looking at my notes too, because I've done this before, and that way I don't have to kind of keep going through. Yeah, I think this will be good. So we have our main page, and what we want to do now is like, okay, let's go ahead and find all the DLs and DDs in there, right? So if I do that, I can just go and say, all right, main page, let's call these transcript lines. Transcript lines. And I see there's a little chat message. Okay. Oh, Donnie's asking if you'd be able to send a copy of that. I saw he sent this privately, but I don't think he minds sharing. The IPNB we're working off right now. Yeah, I can definitely share this afterwards. So I'll share this on Slack.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so we'll have transcript lines equals. Let's see. We're going to take our main page. Again, this is where proper names are probably better. I'm going to name it something different. So let's say main. What should we call this? Main section. Sounds good, right? Okay. So let's do main section. And note that I'm kind of doing this a little dirty and stuff like this just to make things work. But we can always kind of change this up and kind of make this a little neater and stuff like that in like a more packaged form. So let's do transcript lines equal main section. Oh, sorry, equals, yeah, main section. And we're going to do a dot find all DLs, right? Since that's basically where all of the information lives. Okay, so we'll find all those DLs, right? And so this will give us everything. And let's just go ahead and make a new line in this part. And let's just check out the first one in here. So there we go. So we can see here, there's a guy, and we can see within there, we have this information. If we check out, let's say the first 5 of them, you can see here each part. Pretty good, right? Okay, so then it's like, okay, like, well, there's obviously some gunk in here that we just don't want, right? And note that we have DL, which is technically a container because it's DL and then DD. It's more obvious in this guy right here. If I go DL and then DD, you can see here, this is a container within here. So I don't want like this DL really. I really want the stuff in the DD, right? So what I can do is say, okay, let's go ahead and just say for each line, let's just go ahead and do a for loop in here. So this is where I'm going to use some comments. This is where I'm trying to be a little more, what's it called? Like be kind of real life, like how you would actually do this. So I say, okay, I'll say go through each line and pull DD. So let's just do that. So let's say for line in transcript lines. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to do a break. So just so we don't have to keep going through it again and again and again, I'm just going to do one at a time. So like 4 line there, let's just do a print, or let's just do, let's say call this dd line equals line dot find, and we're trying to find dd, right? And let's do a print so we can see if we actually do this. Okay, like, ah, cool. All right, so we got this part, but you can see, yeah, that's not really what we want. So what's nice is we can actually do a dot text from Beautifulsoup, and that will pull us just the text, and you can see, hey, there it is. That's what we want, right? Looking pretty good. So like, okay, cool. Like, let's go ahead and continue with this guy. So let's say we're going to take off this break, and instead, since we're using Python, and Python is amazing, I'm just going to pull the first like 10, and we're just going to print out each line. So we'll say print new line. Let's just do it on the next part. So this is just to keep it so it's nice and easy. Press read. You see? Hey, there we go. Look at that. Not bad, right? So this is kind of like the idea of like how you can kind of scrape through this really quickly and stuff like this. Note that, you know, sometimes you might have some extra spaces and stuff like that. So one thing we can do is like, okay, well, let's just go ahead and do it like a dot strip. Do you remember what dot strip does?
Remove white spaces and extra stuff.
Yeah, it removes the extra white spaces on the edges, right? So this way, I'm just being kind of cautious because sometimes data that's scraped and stuff like that can be kind of weird. But you can see, looks pretty good. So for example, there was new line characters in here. So things we can check out. Okay, so that's kind of like how we can do this part, and we can actually save this now into some information. I'm not going to keep you guys that much longer because we could go into this further and stuff like this. Maybe something we can do like, you know, over project week as well. It's kind of an extra thing that we can check out. But I think this website in particular is really fun to play with. One thing I did want to talk about is like, what if something happens and it's not what we were expecting, especially in this for loop. So let's say, for example, I'm trying to think of a good scenario, but let's say, for example, we're trying to do a .dd and there's no dd in that part. If that's going to happen, this could actually fail, and like this might give us some weird error. So one thing you could do is like try to find these parts, but in web scraping, it's like you don't know because you're going to just sort of run it, like just let it run for like maybe the next, you know, 30 minutes, maybe longer, and just hopefully it works. Like that's not a good strategy if it keeps failing. So one thing we can do is something called a try statement. So have we seen try statements before? Okay, so try is exactly what it sounds like. Try basically says, hey, Python, go ahead and try this. But if it doesn't work, let's go ahead and fix that instead of just failing. So I'm gonna just give you guys a quick example of this. Let's say I do like 1 divided by 0. Will Python let us do this? No, right? It's giving us an error. So a try statement, we can do try 1 divided by 0. So it's going to try to do this. Let's just do a print so it's nice and easy for us to see this happen. So it's a print this part. If this fails for some reason, we can say, okay, well, if that fails, catch, we call it catch the exception. So we're catching the exception. Remember, this is an error exception. That's what it means. And I say, oh, print, there was an error. So the reason why I'm doing this is because if I had, let's say, print 1 divided by 0, and then I said print important information, info, okay? This won't run, right? It will stop right here. It won't let me get to this part. Maybe this is something that's really important. And if you're web scraping, you don't want to stop in the middle of your like scrape, right? You want it to continue going. So this try statement allows you to say, okay, if there's an error, do some, you know, housekeeping, you know, do whatever you need to, right, to make this work. And then it'll continue on. So if you do a print, just do the same thing. You can see, hey, there was an error, and then it gives important information. So basically, it's a way to make sure that if something happens, we can check this. Also, you can also put in like other except errors and stuff like this. Like if you have something like a 0 division by error, so I can actually say 0 division and say there was an error for division. You can say specific errors and stuff like this. And so, for example, if I have, what's another error we can have in Python? Like 1 plus 2, right? That's an error, right? So I can do something like, let's say, I'm sorry, not 1 plus 2. That's not an error. 1 plus like a string, right? That wouldn't work, right? You can see type error. So for example, if I have a type error, I can do this guy. Otherwise, you know, oops, print some other error. And you can see here, oops, too many R's. You can see in this case, like, oh, it didn't catch it, right? So what you can do is, I'm sorry, I put it else, it should be except. There we go. So we can say except here. So basically it's like, it tries to look for a type error. And if it's not a type error, it goes to the except, which is some of the error. If I did something like 1 plus like this, then you can see it'll actually catch that specific error. You can also put multiple errors in here or different types of exceptions. For example, was it 0 division error? So that would work. And then let's just do divide by 0. You see. Oh, well, that doesn't help. You guys can't see the difference. There we go. You can see it actually caught the right one. So anyway, this is how you can do this try except, and you can do the same thing here. And if you don't know what the error is going to be, you can just do a try and then except. It's like, oh, print, oops, let's say. I'm doing bad documentation here, but like if something went wrong, you'd probably want to put some specific thing here, like log it or whatever. And that way you can actually see something. Otherwise, you can see it goes through. Let's say if I made a, I don't know. You can see here is that DDE does not exist. So if I try to do a .text.strip, if I didn't have these things, this is where Python gets very specific. You can see here, I would have this error here, like, oh man, like it didn't work, right? So this is where like this try error can be really useful because then at least it continues forward and you can make sure it's not going to stop versus your middle of like 500, scraping these different lines. Okay. Sound pretty cool? Any questions about, this is a kind of a new thing probably for most people, these try excepts. No? Okay.
Oh, sorry, just one question. We're ultimately trying to get to like the data that we need, right? Like certain text or certain numbers.
Yeah, so tell you what, I'm gonna copy and paste what I've had from before. So I have this lines here. I'm just gonna, I think this will be fine. I'll show you what I have. So let's say like, okay, what we ultimately want to do is like actually put this in like a data frame so we can actually like, let's say you want to do some NLP stuff. And I think this is, was it main section, that's it. So find DL, basically go for lines with info. I'm going to save this into a list right here for line and transcript lines, line string, line.find.strip. And this is, I realized like, oh, I don't want this guy right here. I want to save this as extra info versus just like normal info. So I'm saying person is, so one thing I kind of noted in here is that I want to actually keep this person and then what they said. So what I'm doing here, I'm actually saying, okay, person equals extra info. I can split this by a colon. So this is like, you would generate this over time as you kind of try to play around with this. And then eventually I get this lines.info append with person line string. There's other ways you could do this as well, just what I wrote on the fly. So let's run this guy. We got this guy. We have this NP, I have to import. Hopefully I'm not going too far of a tangent, Johnny, from like what you're asking. But you can kind of see a little bit like what I'm trying to do as NP. Yeah, there we go. So you can see here I have extra info, Jake, and all that stuff. But what I probably would want is something like a data frame. So I'd actually do something like this guy. So df, an array, column speaking, spoken, boom. And you can quickly see now it's like, okay, Finn, for example, speaks 67 times, extra info, or this stuff about like, I just call it extra info, things that like are about the scene. Princess Bubblegum talks 33 times, and you can see some people only talk once. For example, Zombie Love Heart only talks once. So this is how you can kind of very quickly go through parts. But if I just want to look at the data frame, boom, I can see who's speaking, the order of who's speaking. You can see all this stuff right here. You can see here, I can probably do some extra things like get rid of these different parts. So this is kind of like a way to get this data into a format that we can do something interesting. Like I said, doing like, for example, dot speaking. So remember dot speaking should give me just everyone who is speaking. And then I can do a dot value counts to say, hey, how many are they talking each time? So this is kind of like the way, like once we get into like a nice data frame form like this guy, like I can now like do whatever I want with pandas, right? I can graph out things, I can, make pretty plots, I can, analyze things, I can do machine learning models, all that stuff. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem, yeah. So anyway, maybe we'll talk about this, maybe we'll visit this website again. I think it's a really fun one to, like, I think it's like, I just happened across this because I do like Adventure Time. I think it's a really interesting show, but I think this one's a really good one to like practice web scraping, because you can get these weird like parts that aren't quite right. And I think it's a kind of a nice practice, and you can decide how you want to do things. For example, all I did here was to take this line and did Jake and then what they're saying. But you can see here, when a character is introduced, they actually have a wiki page of specifically of that character. So that could be interesting to pull information about this. And you can see here, there's some interesting information on the side here. So you can do a whole lot of web scraping and kind of pull this in together and then basically create your own database of like information, which again, you can see like if this was already a SQL database, it'd be really easy and nice. But in this case, it's not, it's all in web form. All that information is there, but it's not a nice, neat form. It's dirty in this way. So